Hello Internet, my name is Kirk, and recently I've been revisiting Gravity Falls. Lauded as one of the greatest cartoons my generation grew up on, Gravity Falls is a show filled with lore, secrets, lovable characters, and themes that many of us probably missed as kids. While rewatching it, I realized that there's a reason people adore this show as a highly impactful work outside of just its lore and cryptograms. Its themes are woven into the story, and they're especially relevant now that the people who watched it as kids are growing older. Gravity Falls is a show about growing up, good things coming to an end, and saying goodbye. It's about family and coping, and today I want to dive into some of those themes with you all. So, without further ado, let's discuss the art of growing up. To begin, our main characters, Dipper and Mabel, are diametrically opposed on the matter of growing up. Dipper wants to grow up as quickly as possible, having his entire life up to college planned out at only age 12, while Mabel prefers to be immature and hang on to her childhood. Mabel is often more childish than Dipper, with even her theme song being more upbeat, and she involves herself with different boys throughout Gravity Falls in the search for a kind of childhood love summer boyfriend. Dipper, meanwhile, is engrossed in discovering the mysteries and secrets of Gravity Falls, appearing even in his goals to be decidedly more mature than Mabel. The two's different approaches to growing up are often most evident in episodes where the twins have direct conflict with each other, because their ideologies clash. The theme of growing up begins very early in the show, with the first instance being the inconveniencing. In the inconveniencing, Dipper lies about his and Mabel's age in order to hang out with Wendy and her friend group. Mabel makes fun of him for this, shenanigans ensue, and Dipper tries several times throughout the episode to prove that he's as mature as the older teenagers. However, eventually, he has to admit that he isn't actually 13 and do something childish in order to save everyone from a terrible fate. Later, in the episode Irrational Treasure, Mabel undergoes something similar when she attempts to be serious by solving a mystery with Dipper, but ultimately they solve it with Mabel's silliness. So our main characters learn pretty early on that they don't have to act mature. They're still only 12 after all, but that doesn't stop Dipper from trying to grow up, sometimes without Mabel. In the episode Dipper and Mabel vs. the Future, Mabel is trying to plan for the twins' 13th birthday while Dipper is on an adventure with Ford. Mabel quickly learns that her plans for their birthday aren't going to work out like they hoped, and it doesn't help that Wendy tells her about how awful being a teenager is. Mabel is forced to confront the reality of having to grow up without Dipper by her side to help her through it. Meanwhile, Ford is asking Dipper to stay in Gravity Falls after the summer ends so he can take up an apprenticeship with Ford. Dipper is hesitant at first, pointing out that he's never been apart from Mabel. Ford asks,
"And isn't it suffocating?"
He asks if Dipper feels like he's meant for something more, kind of like Ford did when he was younger. After going head-to-head with alien drones and proving himself capable, Dipper decides to take Ford's offer of apprenticeship and stay in Gravity Falls. Unbeknownst to Dipper, Mabel hears all of this through the walkie-talkie, and when he returns to the Mystery Shack, she's in tears. Mabel feels as though she is losing everything she's held dear this summer, including her childhood and now her own brother. The two of them have always been together, and the fact that he is leaving her on the cusp of an unfamiliar and scary part of their lives is terrifying to Mabel. Being left by a constant presence is devastating, especially when you're a kid. Mabel feels as though Dipper is growing up too fast and leaving her behind, and she lashes out at him for it. Dipper tries to console her, saying,
"It's part of growing up. Things change. Summer ends."
Mabel takes this to mean that him leaving her is as inevitable as the two of them growing up and summer ending, so she flees to the woods in tears. She's being confronted with a reality that she's tried to ignore by immersing herself in childish fantasy the entire summer, and now that everything is falling apart, it's scary for her. It's scary that summer does eventually end, and with summer, her childhood. Once she leaves Gravity Falls, the wonder and shimmer of her childhood will be gone, and she isn't ready to confront that yet, especially without her brother to help her through it. In her desperation for summer to continue, Mabel hands the dimensional rift to Blandon, who claims he could create a time bubble around the town so she could remain a kid forever. Mabel, not knowing the dimensional rift is the one thing Bill needs to enter the physical world, gives it to him. Bill smashes it and begins Weirdmageddon, but fulfills his promise by trapping Mabel in a bubble where she can have everything her heart desires, including infinite childhood. The cryptogram at the end of this episode states, "Give up the past, embrace the strange. Everything you care about will change." And everything in Mabel's life certainly is changing, for the worse. Weirdmageddon is where Dipper and Mabel's conflict about growing up comes to a head. Weirdmageddon is the end of the world, just in a much more confusing and horrifying way. It serves as a metaphor for the moment between childhood and adulthood. The twins feel as though their entire world is ending now that they have to grow up, and they each cope with it in their own ways, with Dipper facing it head on and Mabel confining herself to her childhood fantasies. When Weirdmageddon begins, the twins are separated. After Ford is turned into a statue by Bill and the journals are burned, Dipper essentially has no idea what to do besides find his sister. Despite the journals being the objects that have given him all the answers up to this point, when asked why he can't defeat Bill this time, he says in the past he's had Mabel, not the journals. Their bond is what has allowed them to work together and defeat Bill in the past, and although the journals helped, that isn't Dipper's concern anymore. He just needs to get his sister back. The second part of Weirdmageddon is where we get to see another theme come into play with the theme of growing up, and that is the theme of fantasy versus reality. This theme is present throughout all of Gravity Falls, but it's practically spelled out for us in Weirdmageddon. Even the title of the episode is Escape from Reality. Fantasy and reality is another instance where the twins clash with each other. Dipper is realistic. He's terrified of uncertainty and seeks the answers to everything going on with Gravity Falls, and he's prepared to grow up. Mabel is the opposite, engaging in fantasy and childish antics to ignore that she will be a teenager soon. In Gravity Falls, however, the fantastical is normal, allowing Mabel one last summer of adventure before she turns 13. The childhood wonder she sees in everything really is everywhere in Gravity Falls, and so she adjusts to the town much more easily than her brother. This fantasy works against her, however, during Weirdmageddon. Bill knows that she's upset by Dipper leaving, so he uses her fantasy to trap her in a prison where everything is childlike and summer never ends. Dipper sees this for what it is and wants to bring Mabel back to reality, but Mabel doesn't want to be saved. The one rule of the bubble is that nobody can even mention the real world, because it would break the illusion Mabel has set up. She's hiding from the truth, and deep down, she probably knows that she is, but that doesn't stop her from prolonging her stay in the bubble. Dipper knows that this fantasy world won't help her grieve her childhood at all, but Mabel refuses to let him take her from the bubble because she isn't ready to let go. Ultimately, her fantasy would do her more harm than good, but because of the reality and fantasy conflict driving the twins apart, they cannot reconcile until near the end of the episode. During the court case, Mabel's lawyers show how reality has wronged Dipper and Mabel and that life has been cruel to them. Their argument is that it's much better for Mabel to stay in a fantasy world than have to confront a cruel reality that has only hurt her time and time again. However, Dipper points out in his rebuttal that they've gotten through all of those things together, and they can in the future as well. Dipper finally admits that he doesn't have all the answers to reality, growing up, and the future, showing how he's grown from his fear of uncertainty. But while he might not know all that, he does know his sister, and he knows that she doesn't really want to remain in denial for the rest of her life. He says he's afraid to grow up too, but denying reality isn't going to help either of them in the end. Time can't freeze forever. There is a way to get through life, and it's with help from the people who care about you. The two of them have always been there for each other. They got each other through bullying in the past, mishaps in Gravity Falls, and even fighting an interdimensional being, and if they can do all of that, then certainly they can get through turning 13. This is also where Dipper tells Mabel he isn't going to leave her for Ford's apprenticeship. He was living a fantasy as well by planning out his life so far in advance, when in reality, life is unpredictable. He says,
I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, but whatever it is, you don't have to fear because we'll do it together.
Mabel realizes here that she can deal with reality as long as she has her brother to help her through it. She joins him, and they have a sincere sibling hug, which turns the entirety of Mabel Land into a dark place like the outside world, signifying that Mabel has finally accepted the loss of her childhood. But this time, it's okay, because she knows how to get through it now. At the end of the show, when the twins are finally leaving Gravity Falls to go back home, they have this exchange.
Summer's over, Candy. It's time for us to grow up.
But not too much.
This is so important because it reverses their roles in the story up until this point. Mabel has finally accepted that she won't be just a kid anymore, but Dipper reminds her that doesn't mean they have to stop being childish. Denying the fact that you'll grow up is a fantasy, but so is believing you'll immediately be an adult. They were both living a fantasy by choosing the extremes of the issue, but the true answer was somewhere in between. and now they've both found that answer. The ending monologue is about rediscovering childhood wonder and adventure, exploring things that make you curious, etc., and it encourages the audience not to give up on their own childhood. It hits especially hard after everything we've just witnessed. It asks you to find a place where you don't have to grow up, because it ends as we see Dipper open the letter that confirms their childhood isn't really over. They'll be back to Gravity Falls next summer. And that's the last we see of the Pines twins. They're frozen in time for the audience, forever 13 with a promise of a next summer that we never get to see. We have to grow up without seeing them grow up, and that's by design, though for more than one reason. They're representative of our preteen selves, preserved in our memories with awkward social skills and no idea what was to come next. We will never get to see the Pines twins grow up, just like we don't ever have to grow up, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, this is the part where I get a little personal, though I'm sure some of you can relate to parts of this. I watched Gravity Falls as a kid, and I loved it. I was a gifted kid in elementary school, and there's no greater thrill to a smart kid than solving puzzles, especially when they're related to something that you're interested in. I was all over the codes and puzzles and theories about Gravity Falls, and I was having the time of my life while I was at it. It was an incredibly important show for me to have as a kid, because it treated its audience with respect and expectations to find secrets that a lot of kids shows don't often deliver. I can go on about this in another video, but my point is that Gravity Falls was a special show. It was one of a kind. So it's no surprise I've been wanting to revisit it for years now, and I finally decided to rewatch it over my summer. Originally it was just something I'd been meaning to do, and so I watched it, and it was just as good as I'd remembered. And then I got to the second half of season 2, and it hit me. All this time, the show had been throwing these themes about growing up and maturing at me, but as a kid, I either didn't care or didn't notice them enough. This is the summer before my senior year. One more year, and I'll be an adult, going off to college, and growing up. And this realization came after I had spent weeks preparing for college applications that were months away at this point. So, I'll be honest, I sobbed. I cried incredibly hard about the fact that I was growing up with these characters, and we were both undergoing the same realizations. The fact that I'd watched Gravity Falls as a kid, and then returned to it on the cusp of my adulthood, absolutely broke me. I'm terrified to grow up. I don't think anything will change that. But watching Gravity Falls, especially the last few episodes, really helped me cope with that. The way that Dipper and Mabel realize that they do have to get older, but that doesn't mean they have to stop being childish, really resonated with me. It helped me realize that although summer was coming to an end, I still had people by my side who could help me through the autumn and the winter and anything else life could throw at us. Growing up isn't all bad. It's scary and it makes you want to cry, and sometimes the only way to cope with that is by watching Gravity Falls again. But I wish I'd paid more attention to this theme when I was a kid, because then maybe I wouldn't be so scared about it. I'd have realized that turning 18 doesn't make you any less of a stupid kid than you already were, and you can always grow up, but not too much. And even when you do grow up, there will always be next summer. Thank you for watching. Guys, the real monster was adulthood all along. But seriously, I hope you all enjoyed the video. This one was a bit more personal for me to make, and I hope that it connected with at least some of you. Feel free to share your stories in the comments, or let me know what you thought. And as always, I will see you all next time.